All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm just going to wait a few more minutes for everyone to join. Thank you all for joining us today. I see a lot of familiar faces. Hi, everyone. We're just waiting a couple minutes so that everyone can join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Okay, looks like people are still joining us. If you're just now joining us, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, say hello, let us know where you're coming in from. Hi, Karina. All right. I think we are ready to get started. Okay, so welcome everyone. I hope that you're not hearing the background noise that's happening right now. I will do a brief introduction. Oh, I see that there's so many people from all over the place. This is wonderful. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'll give a brief introduction and then to turn it over to Susan. So hello, welcome to Center for Book Arts online public program, Stretch, Stack, Stand with Susan Joy Scher. My name is Caroline, and I am the Educational Programs Manager at Center for Book Arts. Center for Book Arts was founded in 1974 by Richard Minsky, who I believe is in the Zoom. We're dedicated to supporting book art in all its forms, and we offer workshops, events, and exhibitions related to the art of the book. For more information about us, check out our website and social media and sign up for our mailing list. Just a note, we will be recording today's program for our archives, so feel free to turn your camera off if you wish. Additionally, this will be viewable on YouTube after the talk concludes. It'll just be on our YouTube channel. And I think I've disabled audio for people right now, but if for some reason you're unmuted, just make sure to mute yourselves to reduce background noise while we do the talk. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that Center for Book Arts is located on unceded Lenape land. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Susan Joy Scher. She has been a member of Center for Book Arts since the late 70s. Susan has exhibited and performed across the US and is included in collections at the National Museum of Women in the Arts, the Anchorage Museum, the Jaffe Center, and Center for Book Arts. Susan is an early explorer of book action, the connection of the book to the body, and the rituals of opening and closing. Thanks everyone for joining us, and I will turn it over to you, Susan.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and see so many people that I know and have been in connection with many through the Center for Book Arts. I see some relatives, lots of friends, and then so many people who've joined who I don't know. So I'm very excited to be here to share with you all. I'm going to be showing a slide talk, and it will include images of my work and that of others, and some images of books that I find inspiring. So I think that's where I'm going to start, with those inspiring book images, and I am going to share my screen. So let's see. Always takes a minute to get there. Okay. Screen, and I'm going to reduce that and go for slideshow. Okay, does that look like it's showing up on the screen for everybody? I hope so. I have looked at Martin Engelbrecht's work for a long time and been inspired by these kind of crazy, fanciful images. This one I saw recently. Martin Engelbrecht is a 16th century German engraver and publisher, and he was famous for his dioramas, peep shows, and optical toys. And in addition to some of those things, he did this amazing series of people wearing the materials and tools of their profession. And I just saw this one in the last couple months and just thought, wow, this is great. This is a vendor of images. And I connect with this so much, where he's wearing all these papers. It's like a skirt, and then he's got a hat with images and holding images. And I just find it so beautiful and fanciful. And this was an image by Martin Engelbrecht that I saw many, many years ago, the bookbinder with the instruments of his profession. And I got a kick out of this one way back when, where this figure is wearing a lying press and books on the chest, books all around, and then these leaves and tools and just even the garters. So really enjoy his work. It's apparently very popular, and I think you can get wallpaper and tea towels and things like that with his images on them. This is a love sonnet from the 15th century. It's in a detail of a Netherlandish painting at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And the heart book was very popular in the Middle Ages. It's a metaphor for love, and contains songs and poems and prayers. And the portrayal of such a book indicated that a person was rich enough and cool enough to own such a book, as well as having it be an expression of love. This figure on the right, a man with paper money decoration, just thinking about paper and how people connect with paper that in ceremony and ritual. And the Sumatran soothsayer on the right is wearing these texts in the dialect of the Batak language. So just these two images, I've always been kind of connected to them in the way that people and paper and books relate to the human body. This is a monk astride a wyvern from the 12th century. And I find this very entertaining as well. A wyvern is a two-legged dragon, as opposed to a four-legged dragon. And when you think about scribes and the focus and concentration that it took to write, and all that text with the inks, and just have to be so careful without distraction, that meditative act of writing. And then here he is riding this amazing creature. Just kind of a funny juxtaposition. And I'm not sure why this has been a popular image, but there are a number of these clocks with a woman reading a book. And so there weren't as many images of women with books when I'm looking around at historical images. So I just thought this one is popular. It must have some significance that I'm not sure why it's, in the mix of things, the woman, the book, and the clock. So I went to the College of Ceramics at Alfred, and I studied sculpture. And I also met a professor named John Wood, and he was printmaking and photography professor. And so I worked with the sculpture wax and other kinds of materials in sculpture, and cast this wax piece with these canvas pages inside. This was really my first book. And I did a series of these wax books with pages that moved, or hinges embedded in wax, and somehow the movement. And I thought of it as an object that could be used by a poet. Instead of reading by an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, maybe the object could be just really interesting, as well as what the person was saying. So this is a wax book from 1977. And this is a picture of me at Alfred, just after I learned to fold my first signature. And I think it's just so foretelling for me, because right away I was looking at how can those pages be turned around? How many ways can you look at it? How does it move, and how can you display it? So that's also from the late 70s at Alfred. And then I was in New York just briefly and was fortunate to get a job at in the CETA Artist Program, CETA Comprehensive Employment Training Act, during the Carter administration in the late 70s. And in New York City, they hired 500 artists from all different disciplines: poets, writers, dancers, visual artists. And we all met together and just learned so much from each other. And I was able to, in the CETA program, go out into the community and work with teaching, renovating a building in Brooklyn. And by just my great luck, I was requested and assigned to the Center for Book Arts. So I was a CETA artist working at the Center for Book Arts on Bleecker Street in the late 70s. And these are 2 portfolios that I made as part of the CETA program. They were to contain documentary photographs of the CETA program, and they were given to one to Joan Mondale, who was the vice president's wife at the time, and one to Ernie Green, who was a municipal person. So there we are, me and Stormy Brandenburger from the CETA program outside of the Center for Book Arts, posing with these portfolios. And one of the nice collaborations that I did with the Center for Book Arts was a show called The Naked Book. So I curated this show. I started an organization called Book Gatherings in 1980, and this was the first show that we did. And these are little bits of the brochure. So here on this, on the right here is a page from a children's reader, and it had these blanks in here of these kids doing different things. So I filled it in, and every one of those people was doing some kind of a book performance. So that was just my first brochure for The Naked Book. So the premise was that, whoops, we'll go here, that the book was going to be open and exposed, and people could touch things and move things and turn pages. And this was the Center for Book Arts newsletter from 1980. And there I am, and Richard Minsky here, and so many amazing characters at the opening of The Naked Book. And I'm manipulating this paper sculpture by Julie Siegel Bennett, a series of folded pages. I taught Julie how to do the fold, and then we worked together. She made this original one, and we worked together on creating movement for it. And this next slide shows this is Julie and this paper slinky piece and me just exploring that. And then since then, I've made many of these different papers, different colors, weights, and sizes, and use them in performance. Of course, I want to mention Hetty Kyle, who's been such an inspiration to everyone. This is Hetty Kyle at the Center for Book Arts on Bleecker Street. This is from the archive at the Center for Book Arts. Jillian Lee sent this to me. I'm very excited to be in touch with people from the Center for Book Arts archive. It's certainly a wealth of information and history of the Center for Book Arts. And what I love about this, in almost every image that I saw from this archive, was how intently people were watching and listening to what people were saying, all the teachers. Just a beautiful connection with people through the center. So many friends and associates over the years from the Center for Book Arts. And so here we are back at the opening of The Naked Book. This is Richard Minsky. He gave a little performance. He was talking about books, throwing books, talking about the Nassau community phone book and how beautifully it was done. And then here on the right is a book that I made. It was a butterfly book. And so when you open the covers, the pages kind of fluttered out, and it was hanging from the ceiling. So The Naked Book, it was a collaboration between, as I said, Center for Book Arts and people from the CETA Artist Program. And I collaborated with a lot of the artists making objects for them. This is poet Roland Lajardi Lara. I made this scroll on tissue paper. He was a drummer, and so I put the ends of the scrolls were drumsticks, and so he did a performance with the scroll and drumming and reciting. So it was a very exciting night. There were so many things going on, performances everywhere. On the left is Naz Hosseini, a wonderful dancer, with another piece of mine, some handmade paper. And this is Bob Holman here reading a scroll that I made for him called Dining at the Hotel Orpheon. And then this piece is by Sarah Wells, a photographer from the CETA Artist Program. And it had these figures that stood up in it. And you could open the little door of the box and shine your flashlight, and these figures would dance on the water. And there were performances everywhere, not just in the gallery, but I did these murals in the foyer of the women's bathroom and some painted chairs, so a whole kind of environment in the women's bathroom. And then Cassia Berman here, she was typing poetry and reciting on a roll of toilet paper that went through her typewriter. So there was that performance in the bathroom. And then this is Stormy Brandenburger and Catherine Bernson, and they were in a closet. So the door was closed. And so when you open the door, they would start their performance, like a personal performance for whoever opened the door. So that was kind of the door was the book cover for them. And so then after that Naked Book show, I went on to create a lot more performance pieces and curate more shows through book gatherings and collaborate with others. And this piece is called Expanded Stacks Compressed. And on the left here, I feel like it has this kind of very inward internal feeling, kind of a hiding behind it. And then on the right, it's the same piece. I took it up to my roof where I was living in Brooklyn, and then it's like so out in the world and kind of celebratory. So I feel that books have all those qualities. They have that very intimate inner feel, and then they also have so much that they can give you when they're open. It was really great. I met Mindel Dubansky at the Center for Book Arts and have been connected with her as a friend and colleague over these many years. So this is Mindel Dubansky on the left. I worked with her at the Metropolitan Museum in book conservation, and we collaborated on some book gathering shows that were at the Met in the Watson Library. And then on the right here is this wonderful woman, Polly Latimer-Karski, and she was a founding board member at the Center for Book Arts. She was a bookbinder and inventor and just a marvelous person who supported the center in those early days. So go here. And then this is the opening of a show, the show at the Met, the first show at the Metropolitan Museum called Books Alive. And I think there were about 10 or 15 artists, some again from the CETA program, some people that Mindel knew, some people that I knew. So it was one in a series of exhibitions at the Metropolitan. And back to some of the pieces that I was working on in the early 80s. I was really fascinated by the concept of binding and exaggerating the bound parts of books. So I call these chunk books. There are two in quite a series of books on this theme where I've glued layers and layers of board with cloth hinges in between. You can see it on both pieces. And then the book part was a very kind of small part at the top. This is a small piece, almost like a razor, like an electric razor kind of size. You can hold it in your hand. It's very chunky and solid. And then these pages flutter at the top. And it really started me on this thing of the percussiveness of books, especially in this piece, which has kind of heavy cardboard panels. And when you move that book around, it makes these wonderful sounds. This is another one later on using some natural materials, but it kind of in the same vein of a very concentrated, dense volume as the binding, and then these kind of more ethereal pages at the top. And throughout my book endeavors. I've made these kind of visual diaries. Often I'll give myself a time frame, say work on this for a month. This is called August Book and Box, this piece on the left. And it's just from the month of August in 1980. And then it's the same with these other books where I just spend a very concentrated amount of time and try to work through something and really finish it so that there's a thread that runs through it. And when I worked at the Met in book conservation, I saw many beautiful old volumes. Working in libraries is always inspiring. And one of the things that I noticed quite a bit were these fold-out maps in books and how they were, they would be like a flat sheet of paper. It would be folded in half and then accordion pleated in. So that is where this idea of this kind of structure came for me. And that's exactly how this piece folds up. And in order to really give access and know that people could understand what these pieces did, I started doing more in the performance arena. In 1985, I was invited to show some of my work at an exhibition in London. And I just thought, well, I'm going to take all these ideas I've been working on, these layers of covers and hinging and the paper slinky, and try to make it all in one piece so I have everything in a really compact little package. So this is called Unfoldings. It's a 13-inch cube, and it starts to open out with many cover layers. And then it keeps rolling open, and more things pop out. There's all these other things that I, as part of the performance, I'll go back and open and change and manipulate. And then this is the piece fully open. So it goes from being a 13-inch cube to being about 15 by 20 feet across the floor. Lots of percussive sound. And I had just so many great connections in New York with other performers. And I got a grant to create an evening length performance. And I made about 20 different props, all these headdresses, kind of clacker percussion instruments and garters, back to the Martin Engelbrecht kind of idea, like books can be anywhere on your body. These belts, and as we moved with them, everything clacked and clanged. This is Nancy Smithner, Cooper Moore, Stormy Brandenburger, and me in this kind of playful faux rock band and creating rhythms with the pieces. And just some more of our collaboration together with fold-out screens, headdresses, and I made paper costumes for everybody, these kind of laminated paper and cloth costumes. Just another little section of boxes that open out and become wearables. And then this is a video from the Center for Book Arts in 1992, where I had an exhibition called Books, Props, Collages.
When you open up one of Susan Scher's books, currently on exhibit at the Center for Book Arts, you'll find yourself transformed into a display of movement, music, and magic.
Hi, I'm Susan Scher, and this is an exhibit of my artwork entitled Books, Props, and Collages. The work involves the use of bookbinding techniques to create sculpture, which combines painting and movement, sound, and transformation. Many of the objects in the exhibit have heavily collaged surfaces and are objects that can be used in performance by dancers and actors.
All right, well, that kicks me out, so I'm going to head back into the slideshow. It's kind of embarrassing to watch that for me, just to see myself as this kind of young upstart at the Center for Book Arts. This is some detail of some of the pieces that you saw in there. It's called a hand-foot puppet. I made a series of those pieces that connected with elastic to the foot and then somehow to the hand, and created a lot of percussive sound, really like abstract puppets. And then this piece on the right is called Corner Divide, and it's a folio collage on both sides, created as a big sheet of paper or card weight papers, and then cut apart and pieced back together. That one hangs from the ceiling. And then in the similar vein as the unfoldings piece, I made this suitcase-like box called A Box for a Brighter Side. So it started out as a heavy box with many handles, lots of little details on connections, grommets and eyelets and leather handles. I made a dolly that went with it because it weighed 70 pounds. And it starts out, you open a panel and a screen unfolds, or I unfold the screen. And then it keeps rolling out, similar to the unfoldings piece. Things pop up. And that screen that you saw in that video, this is that screen, which I made first. And then that becomes the center of the piece, and I built that box around it. So really the box is kind of wrapping the screen at the center. And then when the piece is completely open, the screen is open, it can be moved and changed. It's a double-sided paintings. And then in various pockets throughout these panels are more pop-ups that become costumes. So the idea is of like a human traveler moving through time and then changing into something other than human, and exploring movement with the objects and masks as well. These masks are in separate boxes. They were part of the same performance, but there were maybe another half a dozen boxes that went with this box for a brighter side performance. And here's some more masks, vellum masks. Always, it seems, with some kind of bookish element. Here's a little dropped chin with a pencil closure. A little book up here, lots of hairbands and beads and other kinds of detail in these pieces. And this piece is called Carrots Anyone. It was one of the first pieces I made when I moved to Alaska in 1997, 98. And it's called Carrots Anyone. And it's like a cigarette girl costume. This panel comes out, legs pop out, and then there's a box of carrots, little miniature carrots here that contain text and images about food and nutrition, and thinking thin about it's kind of the pressures that women are under to provide for families, to be attractive, and to think thin. I worked with Richard Lewis, who is a poet and educator and has an organization called the Touchstone Center for Children. And we worked together for many years on different projects. I taught with him, and I created this box here for a poem that he wrote, From the Sleep of Waters. And that was in the early 80s. And then we kind of revived that performance, and I redid some of the props in the box And we did a video recording of our performance together, his words and my objects. And we produced this, he produced this little book from the Sleep of Waters. So here's what happens when you open the box. It's got all these chambers, and inside are these various kinds of sea creatures that come out. And there's some of the fish in the sea. They're all paper, cardboard, bound in different ways, lots of hinges and movement, a lot of really beautiful movement with these pieces. This piece is called Be the Queen Bee. And since I've been in Alaska, I've had the opportunity to learn so many new things, including felting. So I felted these little bees, and felt worked its way into some of my other pieces along the way. This is a series of boxes, kind of a clamshell box here, but inside there's more and more boxes. And then the innermost box is this Jacob's Ladder box with actual boxes and then extra panels. So it flips back and forth, things appear and disappear. And it is about women, and kind of women who get forgotten along the way, who don't have a face, but could be the queen bee. I did a series of brushes. Another wonderful technique I learned here since I've been in Alaska is how to use hog gut. And these brushes all have hog gut elements to them. So this is a pegboard with brushes. And this is a detail of one of the brushes. And it says, she washed her brushes in a sink full of dishes. Back to some of the felting, I made a series of needle books with handmade felt, plastics, needles, text, my bib from running or skiing in a race, just lots of collectibles, and a place for your needles. And then in 2003, I was commissioned to make a series of books that were given as awards for the Governor's Arts Awards here in Alaska. So I did this series of Coptic books with clay covers. And this is a detail to have so much fun with color and changing threads, and really making the ceramic covers so that the threads are inset below the surface of the clay so they don't get worn. And that led to my getting a whole series of commissions for public art. I made ceramic tile murals for a high school that was being built. And then later on in 2008, I created this donor wall for Providence Hospital. So it's a 30-foot wall. It has handmade tiles all along the baseboard here and the top board up there, every single one like a 3-inch handmade tile, and then this 42-inch mural, and with the donor names that have been laser etched into a maple slats. So I collaborated with others on this, a woodworker and some designers, and here's a detail of some of the clay pieces, working in a similar way that I work with paper, where I'll make a large composition and then cut it into pieces, and then in the end, piece it back together. I wanted it to be soothing and meditative in the lobby of this cancer center. I did a lot of research on circular designs, mandalas, sun symbols, and just circular things from all over the world. But I must say the reason that I thought about putting that in is because just this month, a couple of weeks ago, this is a moose, not a statue of a moose. This moose walked into Providence Hospital through these automatic doors to munch on these plants. And just my fortune, I saw this, it was in our paper, and this moose posed right in front of my donor wall. So it inspired me to include the donor wall in this slide talk. Only in Alaska do you have a moose posed in front of your artwork. This piece is called Stack. Lots of woven kind of hinged pieces with fabric and foam board that's been covered with book cloth. Thinking of it as a movement piece, a color study, thinking about how it works when I carry it, how it works when I move it and open it up completely. Another stacked piece is, this is called The Bull Collapses Under Its Own Weight. It is hundreds and hundreds of stock reports that are just printed out, 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. I was finding them all over our house because my husband, Paul, liked to read them. And so I started collecting them and sewing them all together, over sewing them. And so these were all around our house, and now they're in this big stack. This is a wooden base that has a ticker tape like feel to it with these inset papers into these grooves here. This piece is called Fog and Flame. It was, again, it's something that I started early on in the 80s and then thought about reworking it. And it is 160 some panels of bookboard that are laced together with a linen cord, just the way that you would see kind of the underpinnings of a leather binding, where these boards would be laced and then splayed out. So it's like a cardboard quilt. And I made it, you know, in my little apartment in Brooklyn very early on. When I got to Alaska, it was just bookboard. It didn't have any other surface design other than the threads. So I painted both sides of it. One side very hot, like this one, golds and reds, and the other side was more muted colors, blues and grays, Fog and Flame. And again, piecing things together, I'd work on large pieces of board, different kinds of board, and then treat the surface. This one is a batik on cardboard with acrylic paint, and then cut things apart, support them with like bamboo skewers there, and then wire them all back together. So this is called, let's see, get down to my list here, Coiled Serpent. So this is the piece in one position, and then when it opens out and becomes uncoiled, it's like a figure, an animal figure, a serpent. These are built in a similar way. I made a series of spray skirts that had like a bodice that's pieced together, and then dowels that are weighted, and so it kind of moves with the air if someone walks by. Very light and airy. And this is zip off fence, where there's a series of 20 or so panels that are connected by 36-inch long zippers. And it has a little bit of text, a lot of collage, lots of layers, and things are lifted up off the ground. That's something that I've always been interested in, is moving something from sitting kind of touching the ground to something that has legs and gives it a little bit more of a feel of lightness. This is 21 accordion books called headbanded strips. Each one is, they're fairly small, like 3 inches high, but they're headbanded, which is the sewing around the cord for the entire length of the accordion. And each one is unique. They have collage, insets, all kinds of printing designs. This particular one is a kind of a faded memory of me and my brothers, my 4 brothers, in our baseball uniforms. More felting. This is a puppet, again, feels very close to me, and as far as almost like a family member. It's called Izzy. Felt, metal, paper, aluminum screw posts as the hinges, and it takes several different positions. These pieces are from a series I call the Horizon series, using the spine of the book as a canvas. The piece on the left is, let's see, I'm going to have to look at this one. Winter red. So yeah, these would be our winter red colors, kind of going from light to dark, and with a lot of beautiful alpenglow, many, many colors in the sunsets and sunrises. And then this piece on the right is called Above Tree Line, which is more, to me, has more of a tundra type feeling. And this is another in that series called Sleeping Ladies. And it's part of the video. I'm going to show another video from an exhibit I had called Informal Nature. And it really, I'm kind of giving a tour of the show. So let's go ahead and play that one. This is just a detail of that piece, the Sleeping Ladies piece, where it has 8 arms that come out like little puppet arms. And each one where those arms rest has a little headband, a crocheted headband that indicate where the pocket is that holds that arm. This is just another shot of one of the pieces in the show called Insiders. It's the inside shape of the number 3. I just really got interested in the shape of the number 3 and what it was in the positive and negative shape. So these 3 different views of the same piece, very animal-like, insect-like. And then this is the piece called Trellis Wardrobe, which is a fairly large piece and feels like a little closet to me with these compartments. Lots of rubbings here, use of fabrics, and another piece that I haven't really explored yet in performance, but I keep thinking about ways it can be used in performance. So this is from 2018. And then a little bit off chronology here, in 2010, I participated in a object runway show here in Anchorage. And this was my runway outfit. So it was comprised of 3 things: this feather duster jester, so it's a broom puppet, and then this crown, the doing done crown, and then this was a palimpsest dustpan. So I'm going to show another video that uses that feather duster jester. So that show was called Doing, and it was curated by this wonderful woman here named Simonetta Mignano, who started a gallery called Bivy. And she invited me to exhibit my work, came to my studio, chose pieces, many pieces from my archive, which was really exciting to see. And just appreciate so much what she's contributed to me and in her inviting me to experiment in that Bivy space. This is a fairly recent piece. It's called White Feathered Moth. It's inspired by Robert Hooke's book Micrographia from the 1600s. Robert Hooke improved upon the existing microscopes and looked through at many tiny creatures through the microscope and published this great book showing cells and insect parts and so many things that hadn't been seen before. So because of that, people were inspired by these different shapes and wings. The white feathered moth was kind of inspired fanciful notions of flight, of human flight. And I just loved its shape and have done several pieces using this white feathered moth as one of the images. And I created it out of wire and hairpins, and then did different kinds of rubbings of it. So this is an accordion piece with box pleats. And then in the last several years, in the pandemic years, I've had a great connection with Paula Beardell-Krieg. We also met early on at the Center for Book Arts in New York. And she's been teaching me so many different things, including Zhen Bao, which is Chinese folding techniques to make layered boxes, hidden boxes that contained sewing supplies for embroidery and other treasured objects in certain provinces in China. So I've been very excited to learn those things and make different models of those, learning so much about math and folding from Paula. This is one of my pieces. It's called A Soft Cover for Folded Insides from 2022. And when you open it, as in with many of the Zhen Bao, there are layers of boxes, one on top of the other, that open out in different ways. So I'm grateful for so many people that I've met through the Center for Book Arts over the years, who've been my mentors, teachers, friends, and peers. This is another this is Zhen Bao piece called Bundled Sampler, and it has a sample of everything. I tried to capture everything that Paula and I have taught in the classes we've collaborated on together, our Zoom classes. So this just has, so many different objects with different ways of folding and thinking about some of these Zhen Bao formats. And then when this was the first piece that I made in 2020 after the pandemic started, and we all became so isolated, and I spent a lot more time at home and in the garden. We have gardens that we keep, and we had this defunct hose, so I just thought I would work with what we had at hand here in the house. So that was the hose and these plastic spigots, and created this piece called Home and Garden. And there's all these spigots, they're painted, and then they have painted paper threads that are inserted into each hole of the spigot. And I still have more hose to work with, and so I did this second piece called Outpouring with the hose and spigots, and lots of different materials of fabrics, metals, papers. And that's a detail. There's a series of strips of long cutoff papers, these blues, they run all the way through this hose, and then they become the mechanism for binding all those little parts together. This piece is called Snippets. This is the pages of a book that has this kind of part of a scissors that rotates around and around. And then these colors that move up and down, blend and switch places. So it's got kind of two directional things going on based on this particular scissors shape, positive and negative, which I love kind of the negative parts of scissors. And then I bound them into these two books. So it's right now an edition of two. And I took a number of other classes from Paula, who teaches at the Center for Book Arts, Paula Beardell-Krieg. One was on different kinds of pleating, and I learned these box pleats and had a really good time configuring different pieces with the box pleats. They related a lot to what I had been doing with screens. And again, here I am back to kind of my roots, thinking about feet and lifting things up off the ground. So a series of these box pleated pieces. And then one more class I took with Paula was called Edge Release. And we learned about all different pop-up mechanisms based on some of Paul Jackson's book on pop-ups. So really been enjoying teaching on Zoom, learning on Zoom, and connecting with people on Zoom. And in person as well, but Zoom has had certainly some positive things for me over the past 3 years. And Simonetta Mignano from the Bivy Gallery invited me to do another solo show in her space, and chose certain pieces. Again, I really enjoyed having someone else choose what goes into the show, and she invited me to create another performance. And I felt so blessed that I was able to work with this woman, S. Hollis Mickey. She's an amazing dancer, poet, visual artist, musician. She's a foodie. She's just one of the most incredible creative people I've met here in Alaska. Also an arts administrator. So we collaborated on this little performance, and this is kind of the final little video called Beside Show. Okay, so that is my final piece, and I am going to stop share. And hopefully I can talk to some people. and
Thank you.
answer
Yeah.
questions.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was really inspiring and wonderful. And it was just so lovely to see your work and your history with Center for Book Arts shown so beautifully in this presentation. So thank you. I'm going to open up the floor for questions. I'm seeing a lot of claps. This is great.
Thank you.
I'm going to open up the floor for questions. So the way this will work is you can either pose your questions in the chat, or let's see, how many people do we have in this Zoom? We have 39. I'm going to go ahead and enable everyone to unmute themselves and just ask questions if they'd like. Otherwise, feel free to put questions in the chat and I will read them out loud.
Or raise your hand in Zoom.
Raise your hand and I'll call on you just so we don't have people talking all at once. Just give me 1 second. Okay. All right, we should be good to go. So does everyone know how to raise their hand on Zoom, or you could raise your hand physically? Does anyone have a question they'd like to start us off with?
I can ask a quick question. Susan, that was absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much. It's really wonderful for me in particular to just really understand even more in depth your relationship with Center for Book Arts from the past. And I've seen a lot of your work before, and it's just really wonderful to hear you talk about it. So I just want to thank you for that. But as somebody who is at the Center for Book Arts every day and who interacts with artists and our artists in residence, I'm curious if you have any advice for young artists, because you've had such a fascinating career that's, kind of gone from ceramics and then into this like government program at CBA, and then, moving to Alaska and doing public commissions. I'm just curious if you have any words of advice.
That's an interesting question. I guess I would say to just be open and try to take everything in and make connections to people, because I feel like one of the most valuable things for me in my career has been connections with people, learning from others, and kind of embracing what others have to offer and sharing it with people through teaching or, just being together and exploring. And just and I would say try all different things. Don't feel like you're a book artist or a potter or a painter. Just think of yourself as an explorer. So.
Thank you.
Looks like Milka has a question. Is that a hand raised that I see?
Yes, thanks so much. Should I go ahead?
Sure.
Hi, Susan. I heard about your work when I was a artist in residence at the Center for Book Arts from Ronnie Gross.
Ah.
And I had started to work on a book that kind of unraveled in all different directions. And I do a lot of performance as well. So she's like, oh, you have to see Susan Scher's work. And I did. And it was such a joy to discover that you'd done all this work for all these years. So just thank you for sharing so much more today. I was wondering a lot about that relationship that you explore between the body and movement and the body of the book itself. And it seems like you must have some other practices beyond just making books, and ways in which you have learned to move your body or just enjoy moving your body. And I'm wondering if you would talk a little bit more about that exploration and how they come together for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Ronnie Gross, I'm so pleased to hear her mentioned because she's a good friend of mine. Well, I feel that I am a shy person and pretty introverted in a lot of ways. And so when I started making books and things that needed to be shown and opened, I felt that I needed to work on that quite a bit. So I took many different classes, everything from contact improvisation. This is mostly in New York. I took clown classes, and I was kind of the most shy clown person that you could possibly imagine. Yoga, and I come from a very athletic family. So I have 4 brothers, and I had a childhood that was incredibly rough and tumble. So there was always a physicality to my nature in that way. And I still take different kinds of movement classes and try to, get out every day, explore, hike, and, work on just body things as well as art things. So I think both, for me, both are really important because they are connected, and because I enjoy both too. I enjoy that movement. And I think in the last piece with Hollis, I was very inspired by Hollis because she just really, she would look at something and then explore it in such a beautiful way. And I would just watch her move with the pieces. And so it inspired me to be a little less dependent on the object. I always felt like, oh, if I have this object in my hand, I'll be okay. I'll be able to show it. And that's the subject, is me showing the object. But with Hollis and in some other things too, I felt that I could move more independently of the pieces. And so that was a really good exploration for me, and something I'd like to pursue more, is just, body movement. So yeah, thanks. It's a great question.
Any other questions? Feel free to also put them in the chat as well.
Hi, Warren. It's so great to see everybody. I just want to say hello to everybody in chat. So
Yeah, we've got so many folks here.
My cousin Dale's here.
I actually, do we have a question from Margot?
Or Warren, did you have a question?
No, I had a very similar
Oh, yes, sorry.
question to Milka. Is that how you say your name? But I just wanted to say how wonderful it was to see you talk about your work, Susan, and it's so playful and exploratory and evolves so much, and ultimately masterful and inspiring. And when I saw you perform the first time, I was, I knew of your work more through book as sculpture. And then I was really impressed by how good a performer you were. So my question was going to be similar, in that I wanted to know if you had studied dance and movement theater at all prior, or did it really grow out of the book which asked to be performed? And then you learn that.
Yeah, it really did grow out of kind of needing to move the books, but also my real belief that in order to have access to the book, that you need to move it, and that to give that to your audience as an act as part of the book. And we've all been in many shows, and books get protected by cases, and that's very necessary because you don't want everyone handling your books. But when you can kind of give that view to people, where you're connecting with them and the book, you're kind of connecting to the book for them and showing them how it works and how it moves. And for me, it's always been a process of discovery. I don't know when I make something what it's going to do. And so it's always exciting to see some of those things that, oh, it does this. And to learn about some of those things from people who are professional movers like Stormy Brandenburger and other dancers that I've worked with and choreographers. So I feel like people bring a lot to the work. So thanks. Yeah.
We have a question in the chat. Although Margot, I believe you raised your hand before that question was posed. So I'll have you go first.
Thank you. Thank you. And Susan, that was so terrific. It's like a trip down memory lane. And as a fellow Alaskan book artist, this is my question. It is so different living on the East Coast as you did and as I did, and coming up here to where we're living in the dark half the year and in the cold more than half the year. How do you define the influence or the impact of the Alaskan landscape and experience in your art? I see it, but I don't know how you would put it into words, let's say.
Oh, that's always tough, putting things into words, because I feel that Alaska has influenced me a lot. I feel initially it gave me a lot of freedom to redefine myself because I was so book identified as an artist. But then, you know, coming here, you're kind of a new person, and you can be anything. You can be a felter or a hog gut person, you know, or whatever. And I think some color things too. I feel like I have a huge appreciation for muted tones, for whites and grays and browns that are just so spectacular here. You might think, oh, you know, these kind of winter colors, but it is just so magnificent here in every season. And I appreciate all seasons. And I appreciate that today it was 46 degrees and things are melting.
Yes.
Snow is melting. But there's so much change and, you know, seasonal change, light change, and places to explore, being in nature and just everything that's around you, from these wildflowers to frogs that are out our door and moose that come into our hospitals and on our front lawns. And I'm not sure that I'm defining it, but I feel like there's so much richness here that just kind of comes in. Even just having a garden. I never had a garden before in New York or when I was growing up as a kid, because our backyard was a baseball field. You know, we didn't have a garden. We just played sports. So, you know, all those things to discover and enjoy here. Yeah. So thank you, Margaret. It's so great to see you. I mean, I feel like I'm seeing people I haven't seen in a long time, and it's just such a joy for me. So thank you for coming and spending this time with me and Center for Book Arts.
Thank you, Susan. Do we have time for one more question? That sounds like we do. So
Yeah.
Ruth in the chat says, thank you so much. What inspiring work. Can you talk about your relation to parentheses non-narrative? So that seems to be, you know, what's your relation to narrative? What's your relation to non-narrative? Talk a little bit about that.
I feel like I'm more of the non-narrative, although I do enjoy making a series of things or a sequence of images, like in the little snippets scissors book. I feel like I'm a kind of more of an abstract thinker and a colorist, and I love texture and pattern, and I have a few things that might be called narrative in a more traditional sense, but yeah, I'm not sure exactly what my relationship is to narrative, because I haven't explored it fully. So I admire people who use more words in their work than I do, and that's another area of my interest, is to really explore text more in a more narrative way. So maybe ask me in a couple of years. And Jennifer, I hope I answered your question, but yeah.
Is there time?
Sure.
Oh, thank you. Oh, hi, Susan. This was incredible.
Oh, thank
I
you.
really enjoyed it. Everything. The moose, that was amazing. I mean, just and you know, seeing the whole breadth of your work. But what my question is about is like the technical part and the planning process of what's that all like, because seeing the finished parts or how it all comes to, but how do you conceptualize it? How do you plan it out? Do you have, you know, does it all work out from A to Z, or do you kind of make something and then it doesn't work out the way you think and you have to change it? And I mean, just a sense of what that's like. And I guess that's a really big question over all those years, but
yeah, I'm pretty much of an intuitive worker, and even on the very big pieces, I'll start, and then a lot of times in my measuring, you know, things are very precisely fit, but I often just measure to the object. I'll use a ruler and do measuring, but I'm measuring to the thing that exists. So, and yes, there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of frustration and failure and teary moments and starting over again or redoing, or a hinge that wasn't strong enough for all the rehearsals that some of these pieces went through. So doing repairs and knowing how to do repairs has been really good too. But yes, I do a certain amount of planning, but then a lot of what comes out is kind of in the process of working. So it's a mix. I feel like I have good technical skills and a good sense of materials and sizes and how to put things together, what makes a strong hinge, what kind of thread to use to make strong sewing or delicate sewing. But a lot of it is trial and error. So a bit of a mix.
All right. Well, I think that's it for questions, but thank you so much, Susan. This was really amazing. Big round of applause. This was just fantastic. And I know we all really enjoyed seeing your work and seeing all the videos you provided. And of course, the history of your work and Center for Book Arts is so intertwined. So that was lovely. So for all of you here, you'll be able to view this presentation again on our YouTube page. I think that was sent in the chat. Karina, thanks for chiming in. I'm trying to think, is there anything upcoming that we need to discuss? Come by Center for Book Arts if you're in New York to see our exhibitions that just opened. We have Bojess Press on view. And then Yvonne Martinez's work that just opened last week. So if you're in town, come by. Also check out our workshops if you're interested in learning from our amazing instructors. Susan is teaching, but that class is sold out. But yeah, so thank you all for coming. This is really, really wonderful. And I appreciated everyone being here. And thank you again, Susan, for a great.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you coming, and it's great to see old friends and new faces, as I said, and just really enjoy sharing with you. So thank you very much. And thank you, Center for Book Arts, and Karina and Caroline for being here with us today too. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Karina.
Thank you. Thanks, Susan. Thanks, everybody.
See you later.
See you soon.
Bye. Hi, Ed. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Margot. Hi, everybody.
All right.
Yeah. Hi, Ed.
Hi, Susan.
Hi. Hi.
So great to see
Carol and Linda. Yeah, it looks warm where you are, huh?
you. The magic of I accidentally pressed a button that made this background come behind me, and now it won't go away.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
It was nice in the winter. It was great to be warm,
Yeah.
even if it's an illusion.
Yeah, really.
Great to see those flashbacks. It's just so much like it made time disappear. It's amazing how